The Season 7 finale of The Curse of Oak Island begins at the Money Pit area, where Caisson RF-1 had encountered a 180-foot deep obstruction the previous episode. Mike Jardine informs Craig Tester and Gary Drayton that Vanessa Lucido's idea of leaving the hammer grab atop the obstruction overnight appears to have moved the offending object 5 feet. The treasure hunters then use the hammer grab to remove the obstruction, which appears to be gravel they previously used to backfill borehole H8. Below the gravel, they encounter what oscillator operator Danny Smith declares, quote, feels like a void, unquote, at a depth of 202 feet. Despite this tantalizing development, the hammer grab proceeds to bring up more gravel backfill, prompting the treasure hunters to reluctantly terminate the shaft for safety purposes. The next day, the Oak Island crew uses an excavator to extract some of the stones from the paved area in the swamp. While they work, the treasure hunters are approached by Doug Crowell and Dr. Ian Spooner. Dr. Spooner informs the treasure hunters that the stick which he extracted from beneath the paved area the previous episode was carbon dated to around 1200 AD, a date consistent with the Knights Templar theory. The geoscientist declares this to be evidence that the paved wharf, which multiple experts have opined was created by the hand of man, was formed around 1200 AD. The treasure hunters decide to convene in the war room in light of this startling development. This is not the first theory that Dr. Spooner has developed regarding Oak Island Swamp. Back in Season 7, Episode 3, the geoscientist extracted core samples from the swamp's ship anomaly, from which he concluded that the triangle-shaped bog was formed sometime in the 1600s and supported trees and other forms of terrestrial vegetation prior to its transformation into a wetland. Back in Season 7, Episode 9, Dr. Spooner and his graduate students extracted sticks and other organic matter from the eye of the swamp. The evidence gleaned from these samples, coupled with his discovery of unnaturally interlayered organic matter and till in the swamp, led the geoscientist to conclude that the swamp, not just the paved area, first formed around 1220 AD, and that the eye of the swamp was disturbed by man sometime between 1674 and 1700 AD. He elaborated on this theory in Season 7, Episode 18, in which he suggested that the eye of the swamp constitutes the remains of a 300-year-old clay mine, and that the paved area constituted the roadway by which the clay was transported from the mine onto ships. Following Dr. Spooner's revelation, the Oak Island crew members file into the war room, where they find a visual timeline laid out on the table. This display, created by Charles Barkhouse, stretches from 1100 AD to the present day. There is a thick line of demarcation at 1795, the date in which the Money Pit was first discovered. Various artifacts recovered on Oak Island over the years have been placed on the timeline in the respective centuries during which they are believed to have been created or deposited. A cluster of coins, nails, and buttons lie between 1650 and 1795, in the midst of which are the labels Golden Age of Piracy at 1700 and Crown Jewels Theory at 1793. The burnt iron bracket found in the swamp lies at around 1700, and the rhodolite garnet brooch found on Lot 8 lies at around 1650. The Spanish Maravedi unearthed at the Mercy Point sits at 1652, and the conical pike pole point found in the swamp is located at 1600, despite Carmen legs dating the artifact from 1710 to 1790, overtop the labels Rosicrucians and Francis Bacon. In the middle of the 1500s, we see 2 large rusted iron strips, presumably recovered from Smith's Cove. At 1500 is the label French Exploration, and at 1400 is the label Portuguese Exploration, below which lies the hand-point chisel found at Isaac's Point. Somewhere in the 1400s, we see the swage blocks discovered on Lot 21. At 1300 is the label Order of Christ, over top of which sits a clump of coconut fiber. The lead cross and the swamp stick extracted by Dr. Ian Spooner have been placed in the late 1200s. The year 1200 bears the label Norseman Exploration. At the beginning of the timeline, at the year 1100, we see a blackened piece of wood, perhaps one of the pieces of burnt wood found in the swamp. Below this item is the label Templar Exploration. The treasure hunters proceed to discuss the implications of the finds displayed on the timeline. Jack Begley points out that the data seems to point to multiple operations that took place at different times. We know during specific times, he says, that large amounts of work went on Oak Island in at least 2 different clumps of time. You've got the 1600s, he says, pointing to artifacts which date to that time period, which fits with the Rosicrucians and the Francis Bacon theories. You've got the 11 to 1400s, which fits right in with the Templar theories. And we have dendro information from the slipway that someone was there doing a lot of work before searchers," unquote. Doug Crowell echoes that notion, saying, "All of this changes the mystery as we know it, because it was supposed to be an uninhabited island in 1795 when the treasure hunt began as we know it, but this has shown us that there was a story, and there was activity going on here much earlier, and on possibly a very continual basis, whether it's the same group or not," unquote. During the discussion, Jack Begley and Gary Drayton expressed their belief that some of the artifacts bolster the Knights Templar theory. Craig Tester, on the other hand, remarks that much of the evidence points to an event that took place in the late 1600s. Gary Drayton suggests that, based on the swage blocks found on Lot 21 and the pickhead found at the eye of the swamp, tunnels may run beneath Oak Island in places other than the Money Pit area. Surveyor Steve Guptill then discloses that data collected during, quote, strategic digs indicate that the paved area measures 170 feet by 80 feet, and that, according to Dr. Ian Spooner, it may have lain at the edge of open water in the 1200s. Once each of the treasure hunters have said their piece, Marty Lagina withdraws a modern toonie, or $2 Canadian coin, from his pocket and places it at the right end of the timeline. "That's my toonie," he says. "That's the one I put down H8. The narrator then reminds us that, back in Season 5, Episode 8, Marty threw a coin down H8 for good luck, saying, quote, "Go find your brother," unquote. In the war room, Marty observes that the PVC casing he tossed the toonie down was located about 10 feet from the center of RF1, indicating that the toonie drifted about 10 feet underground. In light of this new evidence, the treasure hunters discuss the possibility that the Money Pit treasure similarly drifted underground from its original position, perhaps both vertically and horizontally. Marty Lagina then asks the Fellowship whether they believe treasure still lies hidden somewhere on Oak Island. Every crew member but Alex Lagina, Laird Niven, and Dan Hensky express their belief that there is probably still treasure to be found on the island. Marty himself states that he believes there to be a 40% possibility that Oak Island was ever the depository of treasure, and a 20% possibility that treasure remains to be found. "But that's way further than I ever was before," he continues. "My leading theory, when I first came on this island, was that it was just collective madness," unquote. Next, the treasure hunters bring up the subject of the Big Dig, a long-discussed comprehensive excavation of the Money Pit area, which Marty Lagina estimates would cost tens of millions of dollars and take as long as 3 years to complete. The narrator then explains that the Big Dig would either involve the, quote, construction of a massive concrete shaft around the entire Money Pit area so that access to the vault would be unhampered by flooding, unquote, or the drilling of a 100-foot wide ring of boreholes which would be pumped full of some freezing agent, allowing the treasure hunters to excavate the Money Pit area without having to contend with floodwater. "The Big Dig has been kind of hanging out there for a long time," Marty Lagina summarizes in a later interview. "It's almost like a child's dream. The science is relatively simple. It's just basically trying to make a solid ring around the Money Pit, and then plug the bottom of it, and then excavate that." Rick Lagina then adds, "It's enormously expensive from a financial perspective and commitment of time and resources, but at the end of the day, you dig an 80-foot, 100-foot in diameter circle. We all know within that resides the original Money Pit. I think it's ultimately the only way to really get to the bottom of what happened here on Oak Island," unquote. The Fellowship of the Dig concludes the War Room meeting and heads to Borehole 10X, where a commemorative plaque honoring Dan Blankenship has been erected. The plaque reads, "Daniel Christian Blankenship, 1923 to 2019, a Titan of Oak Island. This dedication stands as a memorial to his abounding drive for answers and unwavering faith in God. Dedicated husband and father, fearless soldier, preserver of history, tenacious treasure hunter. Dan was an inspiration to all who called him a faithful friend," unquote. The Lagina brothers explain that the monument on which the plaque is affixed is composed of rock from Oak Island and old drill pipes that Dan Blankenship used during his Oak Island treasure hunt. Rick and Marty honor the veteran treasure hunter in a eulogy, keeping their speeches intentionally brief, since Dan, in the words of his son Dave, was a man of few words. Thank you for watching and for sticking with this channel throughout Season 7. Though the season may be over, I am planning to publish a few more Oak Island related videos over the next few months on the various theories regarding the nature of Oak Island's subterranean contents and the identity or identities of its depositors. And some of you may be pleased to learn that I am hoping to have that series hosted by a certain well-beloved actress who has appeared on my channel in the past. If you would like to be notified when those videos come out, please subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell.